the digital export opportunity? I mean, there's been a lot of headlines around, UPI moving out of India and being adopted by other countries. We don't know how this model is going to work, what it's eventually going to mean as far as the country is concerned.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the digital export opportunity. On the services side, on the IT services side, I mean, we've seen what it's done for the Indian economy. What kind of potential do you foresee, and which are the sectors that you believe we should focus on?
Yeah. No, you're right, and it's absolutely been a great success story on the services side. From the sectors that we have looked at for this report, most of them are dominated by the domestic opportunity, and we also feel that that's actually good because it makes the opportunity more resilient. It makes the opportunity more contained, if you will, based on drivers that we see in here. Of course, there are sectors in here which absolutely have a significant export potential. So SaaS, for example, is one of them. It clearly, even today, is a very significant export-led opportunity. We think that is absolutely going to grow very fast, and it'll remain export-led. I think there are aspects of B2B e-commerce or B2C e-commerce where, as the models get proven in India, they will become more applicable for that. The right model for a Malaysia or an Indonesia or a Vietnam is likely to be something that's actually worked in the Indian in Indian real life situations, and so that could very well be an opportunity. We haven't really gone into that, so that's potentially an upside from here on.
Right. Sanjay, what I want to understand from you, and you talked about the incubation potential of India in the context of emerging technologies, and today everybody's talking about generative AI, and how much of a role is India going to play within that context? What is the role and relevance of India in an AI world?
So I think interesting question, and let me pull back and look at India from a 30,000 feet view to talk about this question. I think if I reflect back, I started working in 1991, and at that time liberalization has just happened.
Yes.
And we became from a country which worried that can we compete, to started to compete in next 20 years, 25 years. That then 10 years after that, last 8-9 years have been all around building digital infrastructure for India as a country to really help people or companies take the next leap. I think the next 10 years is about India innovating and using things like generative AI. Because one of the big powers that we have is the capability of talent in this country. When you look at the AI talent, India has the most competent AI talent in the world. And interestingly, we have the biggest problems to solve. And as Vishesh said, we have the income now growing from 2,500 to 5,000. That confluence of forces doesn't happen very easily. So I think we are in that interesting phase. And I do think using the power of technology like AI, I think the movement will be from India becoming what it is today to from an innovation point of view, a Bharat Nirbhar Vishwa is where I would say we are poised to leap in the next 10 years time.
Okay, that's an interesting phrase, Bharat Nirbhar Vishwa. So it's not Atma Nirbhar Bharat, but you're saying that the world is going to be dependent on India in an AI decade era.
AI era.
Okay, why are you so confident of that?
I think just the factors that I talked about. Look at the young population of this country, willing to experiment. In which country in the world, in 5 years, you move from 0% digital payment to 40% digital payment, the highest in the world. So we have shown by demonstrating the power of embracing technology and delivering breathtaking results. So I do think that confidence of having delivered it over the last 8 years gives me the confidence. And the fact that we are now, consumer economy is opening up. These two powers coming together.
So how Bharat Nirbhar will Bad be? I mean, what are the odds on that?
Correct. It's like, I think, or Indian language-led generative AI. That's where the power will unleash. How do we use the power of this technology to help every Indian, be it in a small town or a village, is where we'll really unleash the power.
Vishesh, let's put your money where your mouth is, right? Okay, so you believe that this is a great story. It's a story that has a lot of headroom for growth. Temasek has been investing about $1 billion plus in India over the past 5-6 years now. About 5% of your global, almost $300 billion portfolio is your India portfolio. So, what are the kind of bets that you are going to make, given what you believe, given the thesis that has been laid down today?
So, we have a fairly diverse portfolio, as you know. A large part of it is in the tech and consumer space, which is where, all the excitement happens, which is where daily disruption, creative destruction, new business models emerge. And for us, it is important to be active participants in that space because it impacts not just value creation within that segment, but it actually impacts value creation in a lot of traditional old economy companies. I think we spoke during the session earlier about how fintech, payments is enabling unlock of credit to a large number of MSMEs, which was not present earlier.
Yeah.
And the biggest beneficiaries of this is actually, guess what? The banks and the NBFCs, right, which are already large parts of our portfolio. So for us, how health tech is going to impact hospitals, how how social media is going to impact, how people shop, how, AI is going to impact IT services. These are all very important and fundamental questions to stay on top of. So I think to answer your question specifically, we continue to see opportunities across the spectrum. We continue to see value in old economy companies. We continue to be very, very focused on technology, on the consumer space. Within that, we have made a lot of investments on D2C models.
Yeah.
We have made a lot of investments in health, wellness, in fintech, in healthcare delivery. So I think we will continue to see opportunities across the spectrum, and we are happy to put more dollars where our mouth is.
So the billion will double, triple. What will happen to it over the next 10 years?
Look, I mean, this requires a crystal ball to gaze, but but we are also very bottom-up investors, right? So we are,
right.
Opportunities. When a good opportunity comes up, we are able to put billions of dollars into it, as you've seen, and then we can also do a 20 million small investment just to see how something. So I won't put a number to it, but I think we're quite optimistic.
Fair enough. Parijat, I want to pick up on what we just heard there from Vishesh and link it to what Sanjay mentioned as well. So we've gone from UPI now to ONDC, and there's been a path in terms of regulation, in terms of creating a much more facilitative environment and an enabling environment. What are the lessons to be learned from the previous decade? And as we look forward, what are the recommendations that you believe we need to factor in to ensure that everything that we've just spoken about is in fact realized?
Yeah. I think there's a few learnings from the previous decade for sure. So I think the investments in the public digital infrastructure, I don't think we would have probably visualized the benefits or the potential applications of that at the very start. And I think that goes back to what Sanjay was making around innovation. And the innovation builds on itself. You build something, somebody else comes and builds on top of the public infrastructure. There's a new application, and so on. So I think that there is a positive virtuous cycle of that innovation, which we are absolutely going to see, and we need to continue to, as you said, make sure that there is a enabling regulatory environment to that. There is absolutely, I think, questions around security, around privacy that we all need to be mindful of, and especially as we go into into an environment where data is extremely valuable. I think that needs to be something that's important, that we figure out what the right use and the guardrails for that are. I think there's also an element around just making sure that, and we've come a long way around how do we make sure that this digital opportunity is inclusive. It's available to to the broader the citizens of this country, and not just remains a part of the first few 100 million in the metros. So I think those are some of the elements that we absolutely, as stakeholders, as involved stakeholders, need to make sure we ensure.
We've talked about the opportunities as well as the headroom for growth, but in terms of risks, and some of the risks were articulated there, some are of course on the regulatory side, but others including things like data protection, cybersecurity, cybercrime, and we're seeing a sharp move up as we move into a digital economy on that front as well. Your thoughts on that and what you believe needs to be done?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point that you make. Innovation is core to this industry's growth, but we also need to realize that fundamentally digital has become core to our existence. Doesn't matter whether we are sitting in an urban city or in a rural village. And if 1 billion Indians are putting their trust on internet, we need to be ensuring that this is responsible. But more importantly, we keep every Indian safe. So to me, that's the most important thing to solve for. Regulatory or any other moves that we make as companies, at the core of it, that needs to be the fundamental thing. We enable innovation, but innovation alone is not enough. So I think it needs to work in tandem with safety. And safety could be cyber safety, privacy, data. It could be how to ensure that people have the trust to continue to invest their time and energy and resources into internet. And as Google, we believe that is the really important thing. When we think about India, our mission in India is to make internet helpful. But second thing we say is safer for 1 billion Indians.
So what is the priority on making it safer, accessible, inclusive, we've talked about. How do you make it safer, from a company perspective?
I think the reality is the new internet users who come on board are vulnerable fundamentally. They have not been on internet before. They're using it for the first time. They're using it to do transactions, put their money in. So ensuring that everybody who puts their money in, whether buying something or transacting or putting their data, that's kept safe. So enabling our products and platforms to keep the data safe, ensuring that that data is not misused, even by mistake by someone else, ensuring that people get to understand that what they're doing and enabling them to learn. And finally, ensuring that what is also happening is that as internet takes root, there are bad forces at play. There are people who are trying to misuse data or misuse information to take money off it.
Yeah.
And that's a very high ROI for bad actors. Keeping them in check is extremely important. So as at Google and I think as internet players, we need to really invest time and energy in solving for it. And that's what we are doing at Google very, very deeply.
Final questions, Vishesh, I'll start by asking you, you've made a lot of projections in this report on what is likely to happen as far as B2C is concerned, B2B, D2C, and so on and so forth. Of that list of verticals and growth, what do you feel most confident about?
That's a good question. I think I feel confident about the overall number, about the 1 trillion. Whether we get there in 2030 or we get there sooner or we get there later, is subject to a lot of other factors. I think, we did a fairly exhaustive investor survey. The sectors that stood out most were SaaS, which I believe is going to be a huge opportunity with all the changes happening in generative AI, in all the talent development happening in the country. So I'm quite optimistic about that. I think B2C and B2B e-commerce will remain the largest part of the pie. So clearly a big focus area for all investors, and especially with the consumption unlock that's going to happen. And then fintech as the enabler that that allows for a lot of these things to start getting the virtuous cycle underway.
That's the big takeaway, right? B2C e-commerce is the disproportionate share of...
So one is that's the big takeaway in terms of the B2C e-commerce being a very significant contributor to the overall number. And, I think what Vishesh was saying in terms of the smart money is actually saying these four sectors are going to be the more stable ones, or where you can be more confident. I think it's also helpful that some of these are also already more established. So, while there are others which are still on the cusp of taking off, or, models are being tried out, in here I think we have a few years of what's worked, what's not worked, what are the learnings from there. I think that's already come in these four sectors.
So consensus, 1 trillion internet economy by 2030. The three of you are sticking your neck out on this one.
So I would just add on to that, to be honest. I'm an optimist, and I'm a deep believer of idea of India. And I feel this is our moment as India. The question in my mind is, do we get to $1 trillion by 2030 or earlier?
Or earlier. Well, that's a great note to end this conversation on. Sanjay, Vishesh and Parijat, many thanks for joining us here on the CNBC TV18 special and for taking us through some of the takeaways and insights based on the data that the Google Bain Temasek report has unveiled. On that note, it is time for us to say goodbye. Thanks very much for watching. Do stay tuned. The news continues here on CNBC TV18.